Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Well, hi again, everybody. It's Rob Godlewski with the Think Small podcast. And today our guest is Karl Kleinert. He's the president and chief operating officer of Leapfrog, IT and cybersecurity services. So, Karl, thanks for joining us on the Think Small podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm really happy to be here.
So, Karl, tell us a little bit about Leapfrog, what you are and what problems you solve for your customers. And then we'll dig into how you got here, right? Your journey to becoming part of Leapfrog's leadership team.
Yeah, thanks. I've been having fun telling people lately, if IT is working perfectly for you and you're not worried about your employees clicking the wrong button, you don't need to talk to us. It kind of feels like that's what we deal with. But we're a fairly traditional story, in the managed services space. We grew up as a infrastructure-centric company. And like many of our peers, we're very different today than we were 26 years ago when we started. So right now, we're like everybody else trying to figure out and carve out space for ourselves in this new AI universe. We added a cyber risk practice a few years ago through an acquisition, and we still continue to kind of do the core boring stuff, keeping everything up and running and focused on helping our clients with day-to-day business problems and just some of it's not real glamorous, frankly, but making sure that IT works for businesses and helps them be competitive and helps them, operate in an efficient way. That's really kind of our passion and mission. There's lots of different ways to do it. And that's what we spend all our energy on every day.
Wonderful. So 26 years. Have you been with the company that long or?
I joined Leapfrog 3 years ago. So
okay.
There was a before Karl and now there's a with Karl.
So, perfect. I love it.
Yeah, it was a great, when I joined, it was really interesting after, typical 12 month period. Everyone would ask you, how's the job going? And you get the proverbial, what was the biggest surprise, and after the first year, I really reflected on that. And I tell everybody, and it's still true, that the biggest surprise is that there was no surprises. The company was just as advertised. It's a fantastic group of people built, from the ground up in a really solid way. And there were no surprises. And there's still, we have our challenges. We're not perfect, but I can really still say that 3 years in. So it's been a great from that perspective.
Wow. What a testimony from, I'll call it, a newer employee and member of the leadership team to say something like that. That's great. And what a sense of like relief almost for you in coming into this business as a newer employee on the leadership team and having that sense of this is perfect. You guys are walking the walk and talking the talk. So
I think the first time it dawned on me and the first time I said it out loud, I kind of stepped back myself. I was like, yeah, that's how I feel. And it's true. So
that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So, but for sure, right? 26 years have brought a lot of different changes and service offerings, product offerings, and maybe changes to the way that Leapfrog did its business.
Yeah.
Right. And in times of both rapid revenue growth, but also times of contraction and stepping back from revenue opportunities. Can you talk to us about a time in the company's history when revenue was challenged and how the business managed that period, not only from an operational and revenue perspective, but from an employee perspective?
Yeah, sure. It's this story actually predates me a little bit, but it's very instructive. At one point in our tenure, we fired a client that was a top 5, revenue generating client for the business. And the relationship got to the point where it was just contentious and, we didn't have, our employees weren't being treated the way we knew they should be in the way that we were comfortable with. And so we, split that relationship. And that put a tremendous amount of pressure, on the business. Anytime you're losing a top 5 client in terms of revenue, it's really hard to proactively, make those sort of decisions. But I give the leadership at the time, and it predates me, a lot of credit for kind of taking the medicine, but really staying true to who they are and not dismantling, the foundation, that they had built. And so, we survived and thrived, through that. And there's many versions of that, in the time since, right? You have clients that maybe they get acquired, and so that relationship, changes. Could be, any number of reasons. So there's always seems to be ebbs and flows when it comes to, revenue growth. Even when you look at it, even when you're growing, it's not linear, right? There's always peaks and valleys. Point to point, you might, be improving and growing, but so it's never without its, without its setbacks and challenges. But I think, the business really, it was a good example of taking a long-term view of what the business wanted to be and needed to be. And I think it allowed, the leadership team to really stay focused and kind of true to the mission and weather, that storm, even though the business results, would have taken a hit in the short term. So, and I think that's really how we operate today. It's client centric. It's focused on making sure our employees and our clients have the best experience, and doing that in a way that, we can sustain. So we have to be a, profitable business to do that, but we'll make hard decisions along the way, with an eye towards what's the best for, all those parties and our stakeholders and the future of the business.
Wow. So clearly that must have been a very difficult decision to have to make at the time. I understanding you weren't there at the time, but did that one customer, although they were a top five customer, were they did they represent a high concentration of your total sales, or and
They
how?
did. I mean, we're lucky that we're a pretty balanced, company. So we service a
Okay.
lot of different industries. We have what we call, Robert, some concentration. So we find ourselves with, some good credibility and critical mass in industries like nonprofits,
Hmm,
like financial services firms, and we do a fair amount in manufacturing and distribution. So I think that diversity of industries helps us, in terms
sure.
of that. And I think today we don't have any client that represents more than 10 or 12% of our revenue. So we're pretty well balanced. We don't have any massive concentrations, either in any particular industry or with any, singular client. So we've been fortunate, to have a fairly balanced, that's not always been true, but we find ourselves in a pretty balanced, position, which we're happy about.
Sure, sure. Well, even I'm glad to hear that that one customer didn't represent an overly large percentage of your total business, but that decision always pains a business when they have to essentially fire their customers. And those are
Yeah.
your words I'm using. Um, but you know what? That is a healthy way to approach your customer base and look at profitability, contribution, and just the overall growth rate of that customer within your business.
Yep.
But also you mentioned it too, how they were treating your employees. Sometimes it needs to be considered, you need to have considerations beyond a financial one. And
Yeah, and not to be lost in that, it's a journey, right? So we didn't make that
of
decision
course,
lightly, and it takes time to get there. And we felt like we tried to take appropriate corrective action and just weren't getting, where we thought we needed to go. But anytime you lose a customer for any reason, there's always a little bit of, pain and disappointment that goes along with that. And it's always a good time to
of course,
reflect, to make sure that are we doing what we're, supposed to be doing, and don't take for granted that there aren't things that you can learn, from that failure or from that change. And again, every client leaving isn't a failure, but the point is, I think it's
sure,
always good to reflect and say, okay, what do we need to be doing, or what can we be doing, better. We try to do the same thing, frankly, when we onboard new clients, right? And so every time we do that, there's an opportunity to say, okay, are the processes still working? Do we have the appropriate training? Are the teams doing what they're, supposed to be doing? So we talk a lot about the whole life cycle of a client and that journey, whether it's, think about it in terms of like you're moving into a new home, and what it's like to move in, what's it like when you live there, and what's it like to move out. And we have to really
right.
think about all three phases of that in terms of the way we, manage our clients. And anyone in our business, anyone in the service business, you have to be good at finding new clients, and you have to be, I'll say, good at letting them go, meaning that you're going to experience the full life cycle, if you're in business long
Mhm.
enough. And so you better be good at, all three phases.
Interesting. So flipping the script on that discussion, talk to us about a time when the business went through rapid revenue expansion. Sales are growing, people are growing, and hopefully, Karl, you're in the middle of that period right now. But talk to us about a time when the company was experiencing rapid growth.
Yeah, and in many ways, it's kind of what we've been doing the last, couple of years. And for us, it was interesting where the growth was coming from. So,
Hmm.
as I said, we're a pretty traditional um, story in terms of how we started in the managed services space. And so, if you think about that journey and the way we would have treated cybersecurity, for example, that would have been a very technology centric approach, right? We would have been doing the, you know, building the proverbial walls and digging the moats around, clients' infrastructure and business operations, right? That was how we protected ourselves and our clients for a long time through that technology lens. And so, recognizing in today's landscape that that's not enough, you can't build a wall high enough or a moat deep enough to really insulate yourself from all the different threat vectors. We recognized that we needed a more holistic approach to that, right? So we acquired a cyber risk company that focused on governance, risk, and compliance. So we could add that layer or surround the technology focus with the everything else focus. Making sure you have the right governance in place, you have the right policies and procedures, the right behaviors. Are you looking at things like physical security? Are you looking at, your employees and their training as a threat vector, right, or as an area of potential weakness. So absorbing that business and finding clients that understood that whole approach and recognized the necessity of approaching their risk from that perspective really put us in a different space, in terms of our marketplace and the growth that came along with it. And all the while, we were really trying to make sure we integrated that so that the clients had a common experience, with us,
Hmm.
and that they could absorb the services in much the same way. Because a professional service or a consultancy is very different than a managed service that you might, receive on a monthly basis. So how do you blend the two
Sure it is.
business models, not just the different practice, areas? So all of those things, happening at once was a lesson in change management for us and for our clients. And so it put some good pressure on us in terms of making sure that we were operationally sound, that we integrated the business in the right way, that we knew how to message that to our clients and to the marketplace. And we think we're better for it. And it's been a journey over the last couple of years to get ourselves there, but it's really helped, I think, elevate us in terms of our reputation and put us in a position to be, not just incrementally, but in many ways exponentially more valuable, for our clients, because we can help them, look at their business through a couple of different lenses and angles that we wouldn't have been capable of providing or doing, as little as 5 years ago.
Sure, sure. So that acquisition happened approximately 5 years ago then, is that right?
We're in our fourth year, so just about then.
Fourth
Yeah,
year. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
All right. So really that was kind of a two-pronged approach to growth. If you think about it, you acquired a service offering that allowed you to expand your services within your own customer base, right?
Yeah.
Offer them cybersecurity rather than just managed IT services. But now you're able to go out to new customers with this more bundled approach with both managed IT services and cybersecurity. So I'm sure that enabled you to expand in some of those industry verticals that you mentioned earlier.
It does. It gives us a consideration, if you will, in areas where we were that we didn't have before.
Sure.
A couple an interesting anecdote, if you will. We've been able to help some clients through a cyber incident. They've entrusted us to help them out of that situation, and so they've come to us as a new company because of that cybersecurity expertise. And as we go through that process and help them recover and put them in a better position going forward, we've been surprised pleasantly on how that has fed into the rest of the businesses and the rest of the services that we offer. So that building that credibility and being able to respond in such an acute way has allowed clients to trust us with other challenges that they have when it comes to their IT operations. And so we had always hoped to earn that opportunity over time. I think when I say we've been pleasantly surprised is in the compression of the timing of those things. So as we establish and recover from the cyber incident, they're saying, okay, well, you guys did a great job. We have this other challenge. We want you to take that on now as well. And so the proximity of those two things happening together is what's been interesting, and how the two services kind of feed off each other in terms of helping clients, with their own journeys.
So I imagine, just from the way you're talking about these two very unique service offerings to the same customer, that you're approaching the customer from essentially one voice, right? Am I correct in that assumption? Like, you don't have a separate IT division and a separate cybersecurity division or department that your customers have to call independently.
No, correct.
It's just Leapfrog, and Leapfrog is going to solve their IT problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just the question becomes, and the real answer is they shouldn't care how we do it. I mean, you have to do that in a way that's credible, but they're really paying you for an outcome, right? They're not paying you for a thing, right? We talk about it as a service, but the what of the service doesn't or really shouldn't matter, right? It's, you're holding us accountable for a business outcome. And so, you may want to understand how we do that to make sure that it's credible and that you're comfortable. But the reality is, like, you're trusting us to have the right experience and resources and process and everything else to deliver it consistently, right? And so that's what we focus on, is really helping clients understand, what those gaps are, what those areas of need are, and how we can impact business in a positive way. And then how we deliver that to them, varies from client to client, and we bring resources from a bunch of different, disciplines and departments together to offer that as a kind of a holistic.
Fantastic. Best way to solve a problem, right?
It's just, it's amazing when it works well, and when clients, again, when you earn the trust, what the things that it opens up in terms of really, getting beyond the surface issues and really understanding, what it takes to really put them in a good position, to enable and empower their own business, and how we take a lot of pride in how we support that. And so when you get those opportunities and you're able to perform and kind of earn that business, it's really rewarding.
Yeah. So, Karl, I've got to ask the question, but in your line of work, I'm sure that your clients are coming to you probably every day with, how do I implement AI? How do I deploy AI?
Sure.
And let's talk about that for a minute. How are you reacting to those questions and those opportunities? And are you leading with AI to bring that to your customers, or your customers coming to you for, how can you help us?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really coming from all different angles. Rob, I was reflecting on this recently. It almost feels like a 50-50 split in terms of clients that are really leaning in and saying, I know I need to use AI, help me understand what the use cases are, and then help me make sure I do it in the right way, so to speak. And honestly, we have as many clients coming to us out of a bit of fear to say, hey, listen, I know this is happening. It's almost a version of shadow IT. Like, I need to contain it because I have really sensitive data, or maybe I'm in a highly, regulatory or compliant environment. So I need to make sure that I'm not only enabling it, but I need to contain it. And I need to make sure that people aren't off, doing whatever, with all the different, tools that are accessible. So it's interesting, just as many clients are leaning in saying, show me how I can use it as a competitive advantage. And just as many are saying, hey, I got to be really careful and thoughtful and help me be deliberate, about it. And I'm going to worry about the best use case, later, or I'll get to that. But I need to make sure first and foremost that this thing isn't a contagion, and I'm using it in the right way. And I've come to think of our role there as, I think about the gold rush in California, and I think about, our role feels more like the Levi Strauss. We're the people that are going to be selling you the blue jeans to go, dig in the mines and go find the gold. And so our
Yeah.
role, in AI, I think it's continuing to evolve and it's changing every day, frankly. But I think we're there to really say, okay, how can we make sure that we take all the things that we're good at and stand you up in a way that you can really force multiply, what you get from AI, but do it in a way that has that's done the right way. Is the data in the right place? Do you have the right governance, around it? Are you protecting your intellectual property? Are you protecting your employees? And are you protecting your suppliers? Are you protecting your partners? I mean, there's a lot of parts of business ecosystems that don't get a lot of attention when it comes to enabling AI. And so what if you're in a business that works with a lot of sponsors, or you have a lot of third party, suppliers, or you have downstream, distributor networks, or whatever the case might be? Like, what you're doing has the potential to ripple, and affect, many of those businesses as well. So are you taking all of that into account, when you're doing whatever it is that you choose to do, with AI? And I've I've also found, and again, this is very, the sample, take it as a grain of salt. We service, the mid market for the most part. So there are fantastic use cases out there, for AI, and you see some great examples of that, in the enterprise space. But sometimes I feel, Rob, like people are only trying to hit home runs and grand slams with AI investments. And I think what we're trying to help clients figure out is, let's just go get some singles and some doubles. And you don't
Yeah.
have to transform the business overnight to get
Right.
value, out of AI. And I'll just give you a real simple, basic example. And it's not, this isn't going to make headlines, but, for example, we are a Microsoft partner. We're big proponents of what Copilot can offer. A lot of that is focused on office productivity. That's not making a lot of headlines. Those are not home runs in terms of, enterprise transformation with AI. But there's a lot, of value to be extracted, from something as simple as, leveraging a product like Copilot for, productivity in your environment. So that would be one of those examples of a single that I think doesn't get enough, credit and enough attention. And so we're just trying to help clients take advantage of those things and that are maybe adjacent, to their business, and take that kind of first step forward, rather than worrying about a massive investment or having to hit a home run before you can justify, the spend or what you're doing. So I think we find ourselves, especially for the markets that we serve, having a lot of conversations in that way around AI.
I'm hearing a lot of the same things, not only in my business, working with clients through Chief Outsiders, but I'm also hearing that a lot from other CEOs and business leaders that I speak to for this podcast. And there's a really interesting common thread. But I want to ask you this question, Karl: are your customers approaching you with their IT questions because their goal is to increase efficiency and productivity, or is their goal to, uh, you know, clamp down on their employee headcount? What is their goal first and foremost?
Yeah, I know AI is a replacement for, people and jobs, gets a lot of, the news and the headlines. But honestly, that's not the primary reason that clients are coming to us to say we want to turn this on and enable it. It's really more around business transformation. It's more around
Yeah.
competitive advantage. It's around accessing, new markets, or innovating, whether it's within products or services. And if there's an employee headcount impact, it seems to be a secondary, and complementary concern for now. And they're happy if there is some productivity advantages that not even so much reduce headcount as maybe just stun, incremental headcount, right? So can I make this investment and grow the business without adding headcount because of AI,
Right.
rather than I'm looking to take out 5 or 10 or 20% of my, workforce. So I'm sure that's happening too, but most of the discussions we're having, again, for the markets that we serve, are really forward-looking, and I put them more in the category of looking for innovation advantages and competitive advantages, and then happy to take, call it productivity gains, as a secondary effect.
Well, Karl, I kind of led you with that question on purpose, and that is because basically everybody I speak with is saying the same thing that your customers are saying, right? They're not looking to slash 20% of their headcount. The folks I'm speaking to, their customers aren't looking to slash 20% of their
Yeah,
headcount, but they are looking to become faster, more efficient, more effective, and honestly just produce better information for their stockholders, shareholders,
sure.
customers. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. So I'm batting 1,000 with my CEOs on this podcast on this subject. So that's great.
I'm happy
So
to be a witness that was led. So
well, believe me, I'm not a good attorney, so but I appreciate your comments on that. So tell me, Karl, what's the next 3 to 5 years look like for Leapfrog, right? So you're based in the Atlanta, Georgia area, correct?
yep, we are.
Do you
Yep.
serve a broad market around that area geographically, or are you pretty much situated there in Atlanta?
No, I would say we're a Southeast region company. So most of
Okay.
our business originates, somewhere in the Southeast. We service clients all over the country and in many
Hmm.
cases, internationally. But most of the business
Oh, interesting.
originates, in our backyard, so to speak, in the Southeast. But we
Okay.
have clients that are headquartered, all over the country. But I'd call us a super regional, in that regard. But
Okay.
we operate, nationally and internationally.
Got it. So where's growth going to come from in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's interesting. If we would have asked ourselves this question 3 years ago, we weren't talking about AI the way we are now. So I'm
That is
kind
for
of like,
sure.
oh, I wonder what is the new, what's AI, the AI of 5 years from now. So that I have no idea, because if I did, you and I wouldn't be talking. I'd be independently wealthy and not working. But for us, again, doesn't sound real fancy, but we're expecting to do a whole lot more, of what we're already doing, right? So how do we make sure that we can continue to grow and scale to support our customers in their own growth journeys? And that sounds pretty simple, but when you do what we do, there's a lot of things that have to go into that to make it all work, as you scale. Because again, it's not just one or two components that you bring, to the party, so to speak. You've got to do a lot of different things to make that, kind of viable and scalable. And then, honestly, like everybody else, we're trying to figure out, where does the dust settle when it comes to, AI. I mean, for as
Hmm.
tremendous as that growth has been, we know the penetration has been still minimal, with the industry, in terms of the use cases, in terms of the way it's being monetized, right? So there is still a lot of, we don't know more than we know, as when it comes to AI, as fast and as furious as that has come. So for us, we're just trying to make sure that we, build a business that's flexible and adaptable to those changes. And we're already seeing it transform, our business operations. A lot of that is coming to us through our partnerships and with um, with our vendors and suppliers, right? So it's coming in lots of different forms, in lots of different directions, right? So how do we ingest all of that, and how do we assimilate it, into our, practice? But in terms of predicting the future, again, we're just we're gonna work on selling a lot of blue jeans, and making sure that we can help customers use AI, when in the ways that make sense for them, right? And really, how do
Yeah,
we
yeah,
make sure that it's enabled for long-term, sustainable, safe, growth and usage?
yeah. So if anything, what would be slowing you down?
Yeah, I mean, we're no different than any company that's, we're all resource constrained, right? And so whether that's, time or money, capability or capacity, right? So, and as a smaller business, you can only place so many bets, right? So we have to be really thoughtful and deliberate, about what we do and how do we balance, taking on new challenges with delivering, a great service on a day-to-day basis. So, when I look at it, we're constrained by our access to talent. We're constrained by, our capabilities and capacities, right? And how do we, again, just leverage a platform that's flexible enough to meet changing demands. So I don't know that we're really unique in terms of those, limitations, but, we are investing aggressively, especially for a company, of our size, in making sure that, our people have opportunities for, career development and growth, and that they're capable of all these new demands and that are coming to all of us. And then we're placing our bets, right, in terms of making sure that we're ready to help clients with AI, that we have the right cybersecurity, resources and postures in place. And so a lot of it is all kind of foundational type work, but it's really important, to have that kind of stable foundation so the growth can be absorbed wherever it comes from.
Well, that's fantastic, and I certainly wish you all the best in your growth goals for the next 3 to 5 years, and beyond that. But if there were any last words of advice for the folks in our Think Small podcast, right, relative to implementing AI specifically, because I think that's so relevant with you and your business.
Yeah.
What kind of words of advice would you give our audience?
Yeah, everyone's looking for, the hot home run use case. And again, it doesn't have a lot of sex appeal, but I'll tell you, just, we're encouraging all of our clients to be thoughtful and deliberate, and make sure you're doing, you're being mindful before you turn it on, so to speak. So again, that sounds a bit cautionary, but really it's about, if you do it right, you don't have to go back and undo, mistakes you might make, right? And so if you make sure that, again, your governance is in place, you've got the right classification and privacy on your data, you're using it in a thoughtful way, the right people have the right access at the right time. So if you think about it, what's the old saying? 3 wrongs don't make a right. 3 rights make a right. So have it the right place, the right people, the right time. So again, pretty simple message, but we're just, just trying to encourage people to, just, be deliberate, be thoughtful, and the use cases will come if you have everything enabled. Because we're not use case experts. The use cases are being discovered, every day. And so we're here to make sure that when those do come, that you're able to pounce on them and take advantage of it in your business. And so that's what we're trying to set everybody up for.
Yeah, Karl, that is fantastic advice. And I think that's a perfect place to end this conversation. Again, this has been Karl Kleinert. He's the president and chief operating officer with Leapfrog Services, managed IT and cybersecurity. Karl, thanks so much for joining us today.
Rob, it was great. I really appreciate having me on. Thanks a lot.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?